Today is Monday. What does that mean? It means we are back live. This is freaking me out a little bit. We are back live on Small Ball. It's very good to be here. We have a packed show today. Thank you all for tuning in. The live chat is up and running as usual. So please feel free to light it up. And we're back. It's the first show of the week, and let's get to it. We got a lot to talk about today. Just to forecast what's coming for the week. Tomorrow is of course Tuesday, so you guys know what that means. We have a Tuesday top 10 for you, not today, but tomorrow. We're also going to do a Q&A from the audience. So essentially, I would like you guys to post comments, not on this stream per se, but in my channel in the comment section, and I will try to address as many questions as I can. That coming later in the week, potentially tomorrow. So a lot of stuff going on. We got some more Astro stuff. The stuff's going to keep coming out. Today, I told you guys last week that I'd be doing this. We are going to bring to you my NL West predictions. So we're going to finish up the National League. And then next week, we will move on to the American League. So we've done the East, the Central. Today, we'll do the West. We have some other great stuff to talk about. So it's good to be here. It's very good to be here. And thanks for tuning in. So just to start off, some college baseball this weekend. Fairly uneventful. The only real games of note were the MLB 4 games, the MLB 4 tournament. It consisted of Vanderbilt, Michigan, California Poly, and I dropped my notes here, and UConn. Vanderbilt 1-2 in tournament play, losing to Michigan, who obviously was in the final last year but lost a lot of talent, is still pretty well coached, and probably is going to be a little bit better than a lot of people think just on that front. But losing their top 2 starters, Tommy Henry, Carl Kaufman, losing their best position player, Jordan Brewer, they have a serious lack of talent, and they took down Vandy in 10 innings, which surprised me for sure. And then Vandy upset by Cal Poly last night. So a rocky start for the Commodores. They did not start Kumar Rocker at any point in the tournament. Some people think that he's not quite ready for game competition. But whatever the case may be, maybe potentially, an upset in college baseball this year. So a rocky start for the Commodores, but it's early. It's baseball. They're going to make the tournament anyway, so I'm not too concerned, but something to look out for. And maybe Michigan will be back in the CWS. Who knows? Don't think Cal Poly is going to be in the College World Series, but you never know. So I don't know. I'm going to shift gears. I don't know why this has been bothering me so much, but it has. And I want to talk about it. Again, like I'm a little bit upset, and it's not sitting well with me. The criticism of Commissioner Rob Manfred. So before I talk about that, I'm going to preface everything that I have to say by saying I agree with the people that think the Astros 2017 championship, as well as all of the individual awards, i.e. Jose Altuve's MVP, should be vacated. I agree with that. However, this criticism of Manfred, and as well as on top of all this, the criticism in wake of the playoff structure that he proposed, is bothering me. And I'm going to tell you why. First and foremost, and this one reason is sufficient for being bothered by this criticism. Being the commissioner of Major League Baseball or any major sport in the United States is incredibly difficult. It's interesting. Colin Cowherd was actually talking about this, and we share an opinion on this in his show today. And I prepared this little rant before I actually saw the show today, and just by happenstance, he happened to have the same one. So we're definitely synced up on that one, and I find myself agreeing with him a lot. I definitely encourage you to check out his show, The Herd, on Fox Sports 1. But that is beside the point. No matter what, and I knew this was going to happen, and I was correct. No matter what he decided to do, punishment-wise for the Astros, I knew for a fact that fans would be outraged and say, it's not enough. He should have done more. And whether he should or he shouldn't have, let's keep in mind how difficult it is. Because no matter what he decides to do, he's going to get criticism from either the Astros party, from the the general fan base, from the Players Association. Keep in mind, there are lots of roadblocks in what he was able to do. For example, he wasn't allowed to suspend the players, because of some of the restrictions by the Players Association. So a lot of people don't really have the facts. That's number one. And number two, I think to call for the World Series being vacated, to me, I agree, like I said, but that's in the past. I'm not really concerned with that. I don't think it matters as much as people think. We still, regardless of what punishments he hands down, we still know that it's tainted. We know that all of the players and their legacies are tainted. And these players and this organization is going to have to deal with the aftermath of this for the rest of their franchise. So to me, the idea that the players got off easy and he could not suspend them because of rules that are put in place by the Players Association. So yes, he could have pushed for that. Yes, he could have pushed for a little bit of a larger fine, right? People are saying, well, to Jim Crane, $5 million is nothing, but that's the maximum that he could have fined them under the current bylaws. So does it really make sense for him to go out of his way to argue and push to expand the amount of a maximum fine for something like this just so he can fine them $7.5 million instead of $5 million? I don't really see that as an issue. In terms of the draft picks, people aren't talking about that at all, and it's way more impactful than people think. People don't even think about the draft because they don't know and they're not informed about the draft. Major League Baseball does a terrible job covering it, mainly because college baseball is so underreported in the media. But if the New England Patriots were stripped of their 2 years worth of first and second round picks after the Spygate scandal, fans would still be saying it's not enough, and I'll get to that in a second. But that would be a pretty substantial penalty, and fans of the major sports in America are under the impression that the draft in baseball matters less than it does in other sports. That is nonsense. It's the exact same thing. The only reason why they think that is because they don't know any of the prospects and they don't think of it as one of the primary ways to build an organization and build a franchise. So the draft picks are substantial. I'm not trying to say that the punishments that were put in place meet the level of what they're worth and the level of damage that was done by the Astros. I'm not trying to say that. But within the realm of possibility, there's nothing that Manfred could have done that the punishments are equal to the amount of damage that it caused. It's just not, outside of putting the players in jail or physically harming them, there's really nothing baseball-wise that actually would be enough, if you know what I'm saying, right? It's nothing that he could have done. No amount of draft picks, within the realm of possibility. would have actually made up for how bad their actions actually were. So to me, I'm not looking at it as, did they deserve a certain thing? They're punished because they have to be punished. Their legacies are going to be tainted forever. And to me, yes, they should be stripped of the championship, but it doesn't. That's in the past, right? Any punishment. If I was Manfred, right? Any punishment that I was looking to looking into putting forward would be for the future, right? I had the idea, which would never happen. It's completely unrealistic, and logistically, it's just not really possible. But I had the idea of making them play all of their games on the road this year, or potentially for years to come, because that checks all of the boxes, right? It hurts them and their abilities to get back to the championship, the World Series, and the playoffs. It hurts the organization. It's an embarrassment to the organization. They don't get to play any home games. It hurts the players and their legacies in the sense that 162 games on the road, booing them, fans being able to. I mean, it's that's another box, is the entertainment value. That would be terrifically entertaining. Watching the Astros on the road this year is going to be terrifically entertaining. And if they had to play twice as many games, that's twice the level of entertainment. So it checks the organizational box, the players box, the fans box, the entertainment. And a lot of what the Astros are saying, players that is, well, we're a great road team too, so it might not have had, as big of an effect as you think. Okay, then why don't you go prove it to us and win 108 games on the road? So that's my completely unrealistic and, ridiculous idea that will never happen, logistically speaking. The only one problem that I have with it is that it hurts a lot of the stadium employees. It hurts, for example, the vendors and the ticket and the box office people and all that. So you increase the fine and use that money to pay their annual salaries. Because right now the fine is $5 million. Maybe you can get that up to $10 million if you do a little work with the Players Association and use that money to compensate for the jobs that would be lost. The stadium employees we're talking about. And a lot of people that I mentioned this to have said, what about the Astros fans? They don't get to go to the Astros games if all their games are on the road. Well, this is a problem that I've had with sports for as long as I can remember. Since 2009, frankly, and I'll bring up that story in a second. But this idea of fandom in general, right? If I'm an Astros fan now, I'm certainly not an Astros fan anymore. And people say, well, people from Houston, right? It's the hometown team. They can go to Rangers games this year. They can find another team to root for. But this idea that you have to stay loyal to a franchise because it's your hometown team. I live in New York, and I know a lot of Yankee fans and Mets fans that, I asked them, why'd you become a Yankee fan? Why'd you become a Mets fan? Well, they're the hometown team. So, okay, why else? I don't know, just, because they're the hometown team, and, that's who my parents rooted for. And to me, that's kind of ridiculous. I'm a Yankee fan because they're the most storied and classy organization in the history of professional sports. And if they did something to compromise that, like cheat, I would no longer feel that way about them, and I would find another team to root for. So, I don't really have any sympathy for the fans, especially the ones that are still going to be Astros fans in wake of this scandal. To me, I'm not interested in catering to their wishes and abilities to watch baseball this year. They can go to Rangers games if they really want to watch baseball. They can find another team to watch on TV, whatever the case may be. To me, the fans' argument is not doing it for me. And I do think that the stadium employees would be hurt, and that's not fair to them, which is why you up the fine, take that money, and use it to pay their salaries. And again, this is not realistic, but this criticism of Manfred, even if I believe that I think the punishments could have been different, like I said, but the criticism I just don't get. people are putting their emotions into this as much, more than they should, right? There was a similar scandal in the Champions League with Man City, and they were punished, as well. They got like a 2-year ban from the postseason and like 30 million euros or whatever it was. Nobody here is talking about that because we don't care about that. Soccer fans are talking about that, but people who aren't soccer fans like myself, I'm not a soccer fan, we're not talking about that because we don't care. The only reason why people are, bashing Manfred and all this is because we care, and people want to see more of a punishment because they're angry at the Astros, and I think we got to relax a little bit and give Manfred a break. Also with the playoff thing, I think it's a pretty cool idea. I understand the criticism. I understand why it won't happen. It might not even happen. Why it shouldn't happen, rather. It might not even happen. It's up in the air. It's up for debate. But the guy's doing his job. He's trying to make baseball a little more interesting. And I don't understand. Even if you disagree with it, I don't understand the criticism. People saying that he's a joke and he doesn't understand baseball. Have your disagreements and have your opinion about the punishment or the playoff system or whatever the case may be, but to me, I think that he's getting way too much slack for simply doing his job. Yeah. Shifting gears, I promised a divisional predictions, and we're going to bring that to you. I didn't promise, but I told you we were going to do it, and we are. We're going to do the NL West predictions. So the Astros stuff, I keep not wanting to talk about it and harp on it because it's a lot of the same stuff over and over again, and after a while it gets kind of monotonous. But that was bothering me. So we it's going to keep coming up, and we had to talk about it. But here we go. NL West predictions. So this is an interesting division. It's one of the easier ones to predict, in my opinion. It's interesting. We have, in my opinion, a terrible team, a bad team, an okay team, a good team, and a great team. So I think the order is very obvious. Obviously, the wins are difficult to predict, but I'm going to do my best. But the order of the teams 1 to 5 is seemingly pretty clear this year in the NL West. The third seed was the most difficult, and we'll get to that in a second. But here we go. So I've talked a lot about my issues with the Giants this year. To me, they are the worst team in baseball. I think that they're – so the only really thing that could hold them together this year is Buster Posey catching, that is. And over the last couple of years, he's been banged up. We've seen them move him around, to first a lot. I think him catching is really the only chance they have of being somewhat competitive. And I think especially if he's not behind the plate, if he gets injured, if he's playing first, if he's declining, I think this is one of the, it's going to be one of the historically terrible teams. A new manager who had little to no success with the Phillies in Gabe Kapler. I think the Giants this year, I have a hard time really predicting their win total. I think they're going to – it's tough because, you have no really idea. You can't be so terrible, but on the other hand, it's difficult to predict. Originally, I had them winning 66 games or something along those lines. I think especially if Posey gets hurt, maybe, Kapler gets fired midseason. I don't know if they're going to get to 60 wins. I say I'll give them 61. I think they may go 61-99, but I think that might even be a little bit generous. That's my prediction, though. 100 losses is a lot, but I think if anybody can do it, it's 61 and 101. My math was off there, but I think 100 wins is 100 losses rather is a lot. But I think this team is going to be historically bad. They have no pitching. They have no bullpen. The only thing that's been holding that staff together, like I said, is Posey. They have zero power. They have nobody that can hit the ball deep. They really don't have any strengths, and Posey's declining. Their entire roster is getting old, and they have a new manager who is not very good. To me, the Giants are the worst team in baseball, 61 and 101, last place in the NL West. The Rockies are fourth. Now, I want to come back to the Rockies and talk about them a little bit later because I have a lot to say about them. But the Rockies, to me, are they're clearly worse than the three teams ahead of them because they have no semblance of a pitching staff. And not only, I mean, it's tough, right? In Colorado, it's difficult to put up good numbers, on the bump, and they have no bullpen, they have no staff. But they're not really doing anything to change that. You know what I mean? Like they're kind of, over the last couple of years, they've thrown out, 5 mediocre at best, at very best starters. And, they go out and their stats are probably worse than they would be on another team, but they're not really doing anything to make up for that deficiency that is their pitching staff. And offensively, there's this whole Nolan Arenado situation. I actually think a lot of their offensive pieces are overrated, and their defensive pieces. Their defense is really, really going to struggle. Their outfield defense is maybe the worst in baseball. Charlie Blackmon is a well below average defender. Ryan McMahon, Daniel Murphy on the right side of the infield is really questionable. I do really like Tony Wolters behind the plate. I think he's very underrated. I'm going to come back to the Rockies and talk about them later, but I have them fourth. I have them going 72 and 92. A lot of people think that they, can put up a competitive season, especially if maybe they add something at the deadline. But to me, I have them 20 games under 500, fourth place in the NL West. They don't really have – they have a lot of holes, and they don't nearly have enough, pluses to compensate for that. Rockies are fourth. Third is the Padres. So the Padres are tough. This was the most difficult team to predict for me, and I definitely think they're going to be third in the division. That wasn't that difficult. But the win total, they're a very interesting team. They're the team that I'm probably the most excited to see what they can do. They have a new rookie manager, Jace Tingler, who I know almost nothing about, but from his interviews, from what I've heard about him, it seems like, especially as far as rookie managers go, I kind of like what I see so far. I think he's going to be actually a plus to that organization. And they have the best young team, the best farm system in baseball. A lot of players that might come up this season, Mackenzie Gore, and they have a lot of young players that could turn out to be really valuable assets right now. Fernando Tatis Jr. They add Tommy Pham to the mix. Trading Urias is a little bit suspect to me, as well as Renfroe, but of course they get Tommy Pham for Renfroe, and I totally understand that addition. Eric Hosmer, I think, is going to have, a bounce back year. I really like him a lot. And Machado so there's a lot of question marks, right? Machado to me is not a star. I think that in an organization that is a little bit rocky, and over the years, since really the 80s, hasn't really had any prolonged success, has had a lot of personalities, a rookie manager. Machado isn't a great fit on that front, and he's not a star anymore. So are they going to be able to, find a star on that team? Could Fernando Tatis Jr. become a star this year? Maybe. Can Chris Paddock become a star this year? Probably not. Mackenzie Gore probably isn't going to be there long enough to become a star this year. So to me, there's a lot of question marks. I think they have a lot of talent, and I think that they play with a lot of energy. I think that they are very young, which I think over the years now has become less and less of a detriment and more of a plus, being fresh, being able to go deep into the season and just have a lot of energy, a lot of youth. I think the primes is getting younger and younger. So I see that as a plus. But obviously, there's a lack of experience. They have a lot of holes. Their defense is not very good. And their pitching is very questionable. It could be solid. They have a lot of guys, and Matt Strahm. They have a lot of guys that have shown promise, but I really don't see them, especially a rookie manager, and no real stability at catcher. So I don't see them really jumping into one of the top two spots in the West. I have them third. I'll put them over 500. I have them going 83 and 81. But to me, they can go anywhere from maybe 72 and 92 to 86 wins maybe if they surprise me. But it's there's a lot of question marks. So I have them third. The D-backs, I've talked a lot about how much I like this team. The more I think about them, the more I like them. I have them going 92 and 72. And it's interesting. When I did my playoff predictions, I had them jumping into the second wildcard spot. But now that all of my NL West teams all my NL West divisions are accounted for, they're actually my first wildcard spot because I had both the Phillies and the Cardinals with 87 wins, tying. For that spot, I think I might have overdone the Phillies win total a little bit. I might pull that back because I definitely think the Cardinals are stronger and in a weaker division. So I think that they'll actually grab that spot. But I could definitely see the D-backs having home field advantage in the wild card game. The addition of Madison Bumgarner is terrific. He comes into a division where he, matches up very well with the Dodgers, matches up very well with the Rockies. Obviously knows the Giants inside and out. And I've talked about this a couple of times. It's incredible to me how many breakout players the Diamondbacks have had over the last couple of years. Maybe it's a testament to their coaching staff. I don't know what it is, but Ketel Marte, Carson Kelly last year, Eduardo Escobar has turned into an all-star level player. The addition of Starling Marte in center, nobody's really talking about. He's a great player who comes into a hitter's friendly ballpark and a new system, so maybe is able to rejuvenate his career a little bit. Not only do they add that to the mix, but he also comes in and is going to play a really good defensive center field and takes the pressure off of Ketel Marte, who was we saw him a lot in center field last year and isn't really comfortable there. So it helps their fit. It helps their defense a lot, being able to put Marte back at second. Ketel Marte, that is, both Marte. But, he comes in, he'll play good defense. He'll hit well, especially in Arizona. It's probably the second best ballpark for hitters. And I love the additions they made. They have a lot of young players who are improving. And the pitching staff now with Bumgarner and Ray is very, very solid, especially against left-handed heavy lineups. The bullpen is questionable. It might not be bad. Archie Bradley has been very up and down over the last couple of years, so it's not it's definitely not a detriment. I think it could be okay, but it's a question mark for sure. I have them going 92 and 72, wild card spot, second place in the West. And now the Dodgers, I have them winning the division. And look, I was really confident in my Dodgers criticism a couple of weeks ago. I had them winning the division still, but coming in third, overall in the National League. And then they go out and acquire Betts and Price. A lot of people actually are forgetting that they add a veteran lefty who is a workhorse and is learning now more how to pitch without his velocity, the CC Sabathia effect that we saw, at the tail end of his career, where, a lot of pitchers that got by on velocity earlier in their careers, they lose that velocity as they get older. They have to learn how to pitch. I think he's the kind of guy that is going to be able to do that very well. So not only do they add Betts, but they get Price as well, and Graterol, who's going to be productive this year, I think. And again, I think they're going to get 100 wins. I think that they're going to go 101-61 and run away with this division. It's difficult for me to criticize them now, and they still have their problems, and I don't think that they match up particularly well with a lot of the teams that they're going to have to play in the postseason. So I'm not going to go out and say they're going to win the National League, but I think they'll be the number one seed. Honestly, the addition of Betts and they get rid of Verdugo, right? And I've talked about on numerous occasions the problems with their lineup, which are incredibly left-handed dominant lineup, incredibly power dominant lineup, not really a lot of ability to make contact, almost zero run creation. It's all really hitting the ball deep and creating runs that way, which, like I've said, in the postseason doesn't necessarily work out as well as it does in the regular season against better pitching in the postseason. So now they come in, they add Betts, who's a righty, who's B, able to make contact, run the bases very well, create runs. And I think that now their lineup still has its holes, but it has gotten a lot better. And they almost got rid of Peterson, which would help with that balance. They get him back, so that's kind of weird. I'm not really sure what to make of that. But they get rid of Verdugo now, who's another left-handed power bat who is athletic and has shown promise, but is never going to be a great defender, who seems like he's not really going to be quite the prospect that we thought he was going to be. So they get rid of him. They're starting to become a lot more balanced offensively, which is, it's obviously very possible that, and probably likely, that they're not even considering that I'm just, a crazy baseball critic, and that's my opinion, and whether or not they were considering the left-handed nature of their lineup when they acquired Betts and got rid of Verdugo, it remains to be seen. I would like to see them go out and add another right-handed bat maybe at the deadline who can actually put the ball in play and make some things happen. But whether or not that was their goal, it's like people talk about like poetry, right? When you read a poem and there's these like hidden messages, right? And people are like, well, I don't, it's there, but did the poet really intend for that to happen? Well, whether or not he intended for it to happen, it's there, right? So whether or not the Dodgers intended to become more balanced offensively, they did. So to me, they're the best team in the regular season in the National League. Now, what's really interesting about this is I talked early when I did my predictions, right? My initial predictions, playoff predictions, were Braves 1, Reds 2, Dodgers 3, followed by Cardinals first wild card, and then D-backs first wild card, right? And I said in that video, in that show, that I would love to see a first round matchup of the Diamondbacks and the Dodgers for so many reasons. I think the Diamondbacks actually match up extremely well against the Dodgers this year. I predicted last year that the Nationals would actually upset the Dodgers. If this current Dodgers team played this current D-backs team, I might actually go out on a limb and say that I would pick the Diamondbacks to beat them. Think about this for a second. The Diamondbacks pitching staff, their top two guys, Bumgarner and Ray, against this left-handed heavy lineup that we've been talking about over and over and over again, that matches up very, very well. Both guys can go deep into ball games, and especially in the postseason, that's increasingly important, especially with this, Diamondbacks bullpen, which is probably the weakness of their team. And with especially taking Ryu out of the picture, I think Walker Buehler is a legitimate superstar pitcher. I think in the years to come, he's going to emerge into a perennial all-star. But outside of him, their staff is Clayton Kershaw, who we've talked about this on numerous occasions. In the postseason, I literally don't even consider him to be an above-average pitcher. And it's not, to me, a matter of good pitchers underperforming in the postseason. To me, There's pitchers in the regular season, and then there's pitchers in the postseason. You might as well have a different name. He could be called John Kershaw in the postseason. They're not the same guys. So people that think, well, he's been struggling in the postseason, to me, you take his postseason stats, that's the pitcher he is in the postseason. It's not a matter of underperforming. It's a completely different sport, pitching in the regular season, pitching in the postseason. So to me, you have Clayton Kershaw, who has been, one of the least clutch postseason pitchers of all time, against now the addition of Madison Bumgarner, who is probably the most clutch left-handed pitcher I have ever seen. So I think that's a fascinating matchup. I think it's a good matchup for the Diamondbacks, which obviously makes it more interesting because, we all want to see, if not even an upset necessarily, at least that it goes deep, into the series, goes to 4 or 5 games. So that would be a matchup that I would love to see. And according to my predictions, that would be the case, assuming the Diamondbacks win the wild card game. So those are my NL West predictions. And I'm going to take a deep breath before I continue with this next segment, because I have a lot to say about a particular team in the NL West. So I'm going to take a deep breath. Now, shifting gears, if I told you there was a player in Major League Baseball who in his career hit .265 with a .799 OPS, in 516 games had 98 home runs, so essentially, a home run every 5 games over a 50 game season to, make the math easier. That's 30 home runs. Solid. 288 RBIs in 516. That's not great. 361 strikeouts. That's pretty good. 253 runs. That's terrible. And good defense. Very good defense, in fact. To me, that's a good player. It's not an all-star. It's a legitimate starter, good, significantly above average player, but not an all-star, and one that will contribute, but clearly not the player that you want to build a team and a franchise around. That is the player that the Colorado Rockies are building their franchise around. And you say, well, Nolan Arenado is not a .265, .799 career hitter, but on the road, he is. So essentially, if we think about this logically, if we take a hitter who hits .265 and .799 OPS in his career from another team and put him on the Rockies, essentially, if we think about it, that's maybe what he would, become, is what Nolan Arenado is. And Nolan Arenado is a great defensive player, and that's what's protecting him from this criticism. People think of Nolan Arenado as a top 5 player in this league. The other day, Adam Ottavino, I saw an interview with him, former teammate of Nolan Arenado, said he's clearly, unequivocally a top 5 player in the league. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I might. And we all know how, easy it is, comparatively speaking, relatively speaking, to hit in Coors Field. And on the road, in his 516 games outside of Coors Field, he's hit .265 with a .799 OPS. So, yes, he's a great player. Yes, he is an elite defensive player. But think about this for a second. If he wasn't an elite defensive player, people would think of his offensive abilities, to be lower than they do now, worse than they do now, right? Because when you look at his overall stats, we want to think of that as a elite offensive player. So it's difficult for us to really gauge, how much he's benefiting from Coors Field. Obviously, players in general hit better at home, so it's right. Maybe you can see a little bit that it's not necessarily the elevation, but it's the comfortable nature of hitting at home. And obviously, we know that hitting in Coors Field helps him. But the reason why people think of him as a elite offensive player, despite what we know about how relatively speaking easy it is to hit in Coors Field, is because of his defense. We think in our heads it's like a psychological thing. Because he's such a good defender, he must be a great baseball player. He must be a great hitter as well, which I don't necessarily even disagree with. I do think he's a great hitter. But it's very conceivable that if you take a player who's a career 265 hitter with a 799 OPS and put him in his situation on the Rockies, he would be able to do the same sort of things. And yes, he's a great defensive player. But all of his tangible abilities aside, we've seen him over this offseason having beef with the front office, and it's tough because there's a lot of players that show their emotion and play with energy and address sort of the situations that they're in with a lot of energy and enthusiasm. But him, to me, Nolan Arenado, to take his talents away, strip them away from this conversation for like 10, 20, maybe 30 seconds. He's not the kind of guy that I see, and this is one of the knocks that I have on him. He's not the kind of player and personality who I see being able to make that work. He has been, over the course of his career, in fights, physical fights in the dugout over pitch selection. He is now calling out his front office and going out of his way to do so. So, to me, he is an otherworldly talent who we might think a little bit too highly of because of the situation that he's in. And the Rockies, so that's Nolan Arenado. That's the knock that I have on him. Here's the knock or knocks that I have on the Rockies. The Rockies have been, for as long as I can remember, very, very decent at baseball, okay? They have had almost no superstar talent until Nolan Arenado. Their best players are the only real player I can think of substantial in note is Todd Helton. And they've never been awful, so I think, a lot of people don't really see them as that kind of a franchise like the Mets, like the Padres. So are they really interested in continuing with that mediocrity? And like I said, with their pitching staff, they haven't done anything to try to spark something, right? And it's really difficult to attract free agent talent in Colorado because pitchers don't want to go there because their stats are going to take a big hit, and hitters don't want to go there because their stats will be tainted. So they don't do a good job in free agency. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that it's being in Colorado. They do an atrocious job drafting. They haven't drafted, outside of Arenado, a star player ever. They haven't really drafted anyone. I mean, their 2016 first-round pick, Riley Pint, is a right-handed 6-footer throwing 100 who even my dog could have predicted wasn't going to stay healthy. And right now, their other prospects are Brendan Rodgers, who's a bust, let's face it, Garrett Hampton, who's a 5'10 shortstop who can't throw or really hit for power. He's a bust, in my opinion. Trevor Story is good, but same sort of, situation as Arenado, where we don't really know exactly how to value him. His strikeout totals and K rate and his contact rate is very high, and it's something that definitely is a question mark for me. Ryan McMahon is not a bust. He can hit, but he cannot defend, and if not in Colorado, I'm not really sure what kind of hitter he is. So to me, if I'm the Rockies, first thing I do is fire Bud Black, because this team, the characters on this team, they have not gelled well at all. Arenado, their superstar player who they're supposed to be building around, is fighting with his teammates, fighting in the dugout with his pitching staff, his catchers, about pitch selection. It's not a good look. It's not a good culture. I fire Bud Black. He hasn't done anything, remotely well in his tenure in Colorado. They've been average, like I said, but there's nothing that I look at that team and I say they have the potential to do special things in the postseason. So I fire Bud Black. I trade everyone. I clean house. I rebuild. I trade Arenado. I trade Blackmon, who's overrated because he is a very, very good hitter with tremendous hand-eye coordination, but his defense is bottom 5 in the league among center fielders. It's really, really not good, which is particularly important in Colorado with the expansive outfield. The outfield, people don't realize this, the outfield is very, very big to account for, the elevation and the ability to hit the ball far. I trade him. I trade Arenado. I see what I can get for Brendan Rodgers and Garrett Hampton and Ryan McMahon. Riley Pint is a bust because he's not going to stay healthy. He's a 6-foot righty who throws 100 miles an hour. And I clean house. And when you think about it, they don't draft well at all. They don't do free agency well at all. They don't coach well at all. Their only legitimate chance at being competitive in the postseason is the trade market. So to me, you can either keep what you have and continue to draft poorly, continue to not attract big-name free agents, continue to play with a below-average manager who doesn't really bring any positive qualities to the team, or you can be aggressive, roll the dice, and see what you can get in the trade market, because they have a lot of talent and a lot of guys with value. See what you can get for Arenado, Blackmon, Pint, Rodgers. You can get some significant talent for that. And to me, it's a decision between staying mediocre for the next 5-10 years or rolling the dice and probably having a rough, year or two. But and it's a weird fit in Colorado. It's difficult to, really have significant, substantial success. It's just a weird kind of place to play. People don't like to play there. Like I said, pitchers don't want to play there. Hitters don't want to play there. It's tough. But see what you can do in the trade, in the trade market. You need the farm system right now is not good. They have a lot of guys who, let's face it, are busts. Garrett Hampton, Brendan Rodgers, Riley Pint, these are busts. I think Ryan McMahon could be a bust. So I think you got to shuffle the farm system. I think you have to see what you can get for the major league talent, because they really don't. I mean, they've had this talent for years, and they haven't done anything since they were in the playoffs in 2016. So I do like Tony Wolters. I would keep him. I think they haven't had any stability at catcher for as long as I can remember. To me, he's a great defender with a great contact rate and is incredible with the pitching staff, which is very important in Colorado for obvious reasons. I keep him, but everybody else to me is fair game on the trade block. And I rebuild. I fire Bud Black. I go get, I roll the dice on a new, probably rookie manager, and I get Nolan Arenado out of that situation because I think he is a great talent, a tremendous player, but he doesn't gel with the franchise. He's beefing right now with the front office. He is an emotional guy that probably is not what you need right now. And the longer you wait on Nolan Arenado, the less valuable he becomes, because yes, he's in his prime and he's an incredible talent, but pretty soon he's going to start to hit his 30s and you might find yourself in a situation where you really can't trade him because you're not going to be able to get a return that's going to be worth it. So if I'm the Rockies, fire Bud Black, trade everyone of value, and you got to mix it up because there aren't a lot of teams that are consistently average. So if they want to continue to be consistently average, they can keep what they have. And, it's funny. It's like there's winning baseball games, but then there's also just the culture of the team, right? And if you're the front office of the Rockies, do you really want to put up with Arenado for another 2 to 3 years, put up with these prospects who are not turning out to be really anything, put up with a abysmal pitching staff, and just so that you can win 75 games? Like, I could see putting up with those things to make the playoffs and do something, but when you're going to continue to win 80, 75, I have them winning 72 games this year, all those headaches are not worth it. So I trade Arenado, I trade everyone, I fire Bud Black, and I roll the dice and just completely get a whole new lot of young talent. Shifting gears again. So that was my Rockies spiel. They're fourth clearly. And again, it's like they're in a division now. I'm going to continue with the Rockies. They're in a division now with the Dodgers, with the Diamondbacks, who I think very highly of, and the Padres, who have the best farm system in baseball and a lot of guys who are ready to make that leap. So with the current roster they have right now and all of the annoyances that they have to put up with, they're the fourth best team in this division. The only team that's worse than them is the Giants, who I think are the worst team in baseball. So do they really want to be competing for the third spot in the NL West for the next 5 years? I think not. So I trade everyone. I trade everyone, including the manager. Bud Black, to me, it's not even a knock against his managing ability, but the culture there is not good right now. I get a new manager. And one last thing, we have a couple minutes left. The other day, last week, I did my shortstop top 10, my Tuesday top 10. I did it on Thursday. And I got some criticism from you guys, from the audience, about leaving a particular player off of my list. And this particular player, in his career, has hit 276 with a 738 OPS. 2 seasons ago, hit 240 with a 687 OPS and 53 runs. Last season had 56 RBIs. Tim Anderson, to me, I might have disrespected him a little bit. I'm going to give you guys that benefit of the doubt. But I still don't think he's a top 10 shortstop in this league. He had an incredible season last year, hitting 335, 865 OPS, which is good, not great. His K rate actually improved a lot. He only had 109 strikeouts. In 123 games, he was banged up a little bit. But over the course of his career, he has been a very high strikeout kind of guy. He's a career 276 hitter. Let's not kid ourselves. He had an incredible season where he led the league in hitting. But in his career, he's hit 276. In 2018, he hit 240 with a 687 OPS. So yes, breakout season. But again, very high effort swing. I've talked about this on numerous occasions. 56 RBIs for a guy with an 865 OPS. 56 RBIs. 81 runs is decent. So I look at that number, 56. And to me, optics are a lot more important than we think. Now, I'm actually going to talk about this later in the week. So I'm not going to really go there. But to me, when I think of Tim Anderson, I don't look at the statistics. When I think of Tim Anderson, I think of an incredible athlete who is a good leader, a good teammate. I like, what I've heard from him in interviews, and he seems like a good guy and seems like he's a good teammate. But there's one thing missing with Tim Anderson. Besides his defense, so there's 2 things missing. His defense is below average for sure. He is athletic, and he has a very strong throwing arm, but his hands are just about as bad as they can be for a starting shortstop. He had 26 errors last year, and he only had 182 putouts in 122 games. So his tracking the ball in the air is well below average. He had 324 assists, which I'll give him that credit, is more than I would have thought. And that's a testament to his athleticism, his throwing arm. But defensively, he's not what I'm looking for in a shortstop. 26 errors is a really, really high number. But there's one other thing missing. And you guys are probably going to get on me about this, but he is not clutch. And when we think of clutch players, we think of, the postseason, right? We think of, big moments against top-level arms, right? And Tim Anderson's never been to the postseason, so it's hard to judge that. But I'm going to judge that. And optics, like I said, mean more than we think. When I think of Tim Anderson, I think of a guy who's not clutch. And you're going to say, well, you don't have the numbers to back that up. Well, I did a little research. I found some numbers that actually back that up. But when we think of players and whatever comes into our mind, there's a reason for that, right? There's a reason why I don't think Tim Anderson, in a big spot on a postseason level team, postseason caliber team, is going to produce. So numbers aside, optically, from watching him play, I don't have the confidence in him in big spots. I like his athleticism. I like his leadership. I like his intangibles for the most part. But Tim Anderson, this is interesting. This is really, really interesting. In the 8th inning of games, he's hit 187 in his career. But that's it's a silly statistic that, it's whatever, right? It could mean a lot of things. Against power pitchers, this is defined by Baseball Reference. It takes into account velocity and spin rate and all that stuff. Power pitchers, the type of pitchers that we see in the postseason, he's hit 190 in his career. 190 in his career against guys who throw hard. I'm not sure exactly how hard. And guess what? In big spots, which is defined as 2 outs with runners in scoring position, he's hit in his career, including his 335 season last year, 216 with a 635 OPS. Everything else, he's hit 285 with a 750 OPS, something like that. So in big spots, they call it, runners in scoring position with 2 outs, he's a career 216 hitter. And against power pitchers, who we see in the playoffs all over the place, in the bullpen, a lot of starters in the postseason are power pitchers, 190 career. So that explains his 56 RBIs for a guy who hit for an 865 OPS, which is very good. So, yes, he's extremely talented. Yes, he's extremely athletic. And I like his intangibles. But his defense is very much below average. He's athletic, so it makes up for some of his flaws on the defensive side of the ball. But his defense is very questionable, and his clutch, and again, you guys are probably going to get on me about this, but I have the numbers to back it up, and optically, I don't trust him in big spots. Career 216 hitter with a 635 OPS with runners in scoring position and 2 outs. And against power pitchers, they call it career 190 hitter. So in the postseason, which is what we talked about when we did our list, we did players that I would want for a season to win the championship. Against a power pitcher with runners in scoring position and 2 outs, Tim Anderson is not the guy I want up at the plate and not the guy I want defensively at shortstop either. So I might have disrespected him a bit, leaving him off the list. But if I were to do it again, I think I would have to leave him off of it. So I got a lot of slack for that one. from you guys, from the audience, but I am confident in my decision that Tim Anderson is not a top 10 shortstop. So thank you guys so much for watching. That'll do it for today's show. We'll be back out tomorrow. Like I said, it's a Tuesday top 10. We're going to do third base tomorrow, and we got some other stuff to talk about as well. I really want to get to this MLB top 100 stuff because there's a lot of things I want to talk about, but we'll get down to that stuff maybe tomorrow, maybe later in the week. So we got a lot to talk about tomorrow. Tune in for sure. And don't forget to leave your comments on my channel so I can address them in my audience Q&A. Excuse me, later in the week, perhaps tomorrow, depending on the schedule. So again, thank you for watching. Drop a sub if you haven't. Drop a like on the stream. Recommend to your friends and family if you haven't done so already. And you feel like it is warranted. I will see you guys tomorrow, Tuesday. Back at it on Small Ball, another show. Logo coming later in the week, so get excited for that. And I'm going to start uploading segments of the stream on Instagram. So if you don't follow the Small Ball Instagram, do that as well. And I'm also going to be posting some important quotes of mine to keep in mind. So we did our NL West predictions: Dodgers, D-backs, Padres, Rockies, Giants. We talked Astros stuff, Manfred, Nolan Arenado in the Rockies, and Tim Anderson is not a top 10 shortstop. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you tomorrow. Get hyped for Small Ball. 9 o'clock. We'll probably start late like we usually do, but I will keep you notified. See you guys later. Thanks for watching. Peace.